Hola and welcome to the Get Down. I'm Ritzy P. And in this episode's All Things Butterscotch segment with CEO and managing editor of Butterscotch Media, Cleve Mesidor, we will discuss how this podcast focuses on policy, not politics. Today's guest is Corey Jayohcee Jocko. He's an indigenous musician and digital artist. He was recently featured on Butterscotch Media's newsletter, Choose, May 6th issue. He's based in Ontario, Canada. And in this episode, we will discuss how Web3 is borderless and his work is borderless, his entry into Web3, how blockchain can empower indigenous communities, and so much more. So now let's get into all things butterscotch with Cleve Mesidor. Cleve.
Hey, Ritzy.
Hey, Cleve. So let's start off with a priority for you for Butterscotch Media is to focus on crypto policy, not partisan politics. Could you explain?
Yes. So unlike other typical platforms, we are a news outlet, right? Butterscotch Media is anchored in news. And that's why the newsletter is a cheap sheet that focuses on policy, industry trends, market research. The podcast, we're having conversations about policy. And our live events will actually be centered around policy. But I don't want that to be confused with politics, right? We need a regulatory framework that makes sense for blockchain and cryptocurrency so that innovation can foster. That requires policy. We know politics can be very contentious. And I will say also, innovators, creators, founders in the space, especially diverse ones, we need support from all segments of the political sphere. So for me, it's important for people to understand while we focus on news, we focus on policy. We don't want that to be confused with politics. The right policies are inclusive. They actually create more space. They make it easier for, people who have been locked out to participate. And that will take a bipartisan effort.
Right. So you stress the importance of inclusive policymaking and rulemaking in the policy debate at the federal, state, local, and tribal levels. Could you tell us more about that?
Yes, there's so much focus on Washington, and obviously across Butterscotch Media, we will be focusing on what's happening in the halls of power across Washington. But some of the most interesting things that are happening across Web3 and DeFi are in states, right? Are in local municipalities, even in tribal communities. So I want to make sure we know that what's happening in Congress is important, but so is what's happening in Columbus, in Anaheim, California, in Detroit, right, in Oakland. And so we want to make sure that we're finding out, what are some of the trends happening at the state and local level? Because let's be honest, many states, many cities, and even some tribal communities have taken great steps to put in a regulatory framework, put in regulatory sandbags. And quite frankly, Washington is lagging behind. So, inclusive policy making and rulemaking is happening across the board, locally, nationally, and globally. And we want to make sure we're following all of that for our audience and for our communities.
Love that. So I know you're excited about today's guest, and a big priority for Butterscotch Media is to put a spotlight on the earliest and largest adopters of Web3 and DeFi. Indigenous creators and innovators have been a part of that journey and narrative. Why are you so passionate about this?
Yeah. The earliest and the largest adopters are communities of color, young people, groups that have been locked out, but we're not present when it comes to media and also congressional focus, right? So I want to make sure that we are focused on Black, Latino, Indigenous communities. The data shows Black and Latino communities lead national adoption of cryptocurrency, but we don't have enough data about the early Indigenous folks from across reservations and territories in the US or even in surrounding areas. So one of the biggest goals for Butterscotch is to build community and also leverage that to do some market research, to do some surveys, to do some data. One of the things we know is that communities that have been locked out, the inequities that play out, they play out differently in different communities. Just as crypto is not a monolith, so is being Black is not a monolith. Nor is being Latinx a monolith, or nor is it being indigenous. Like, so even, I will be honest in terms of how we find information about Black crypto, Latinx crypto, indigenous crypto, very, very, very different. These communities are playing out differently. And so we want to honor that, and we want to make sure we're creating tools and access points so we can respectfully tell those stories, gather those data, and make sure that we can create a pipeline for opportunity. So much great work is already being done across these communities. The goal is to put a spotlight on them, get resources so that they can scale and also compete.
Love that. Well, thank you for creating this platform, Cleve, and I look forward to our next discussion about all things butterscotch.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Okay, so let's welcome our butterscotch king, Corey Jayohcee Jocko. He's an indigenous hip-hop artist, NFT creator, and supporter based in Ontario, Canada. He was recently featured in one of the latest May 6 issues of Butterscotch Media's Chew, the newsletter. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet, where he was featured as an interview at Attention Live at this year's NFT NYC. And I also have had the honor and privilege of meeting him back in 2003 when he was a part of the first and hopefully not the last all 100% indigenous panel at NFT NYC. Jayohcee, thank you so much for being here with us today. How are you?
Good. Sego Skanagoga. Sego's hello in my language, Mohawk. I'm from Akwesasne, and it's an honor to be here with Queens and to be able to share space and, Ritzy to be able to reach out after all these years and, still show support and, to build these bridges and bonds. It's, amazing to artists like myself. So thank you, Ritzy, and thank you everybody for, putting this together, and shout out to everybody at Butterscotch making major moves for all of us.
Awesome. Thank you, man. I really appreciate that. I mean, to be at the place where we met for an entire indigenous panel at NFT NYC, I mean, it was emotional. I mean, you guys were crying. We were crying. I mean, because it was such a pivotal moment. And then I got to see you again today. I was like, where's everybody at? And I got to see you earlier this year at this year's NFT NYC. And that was a blessing, and to meet your partner and stuff. So why don't we start off by telling the folks your journey into Web3?
Oh, yeah, perfect. And it's been a long one, and it hasn't been easy. And, coming from a reserve, I live on a Native American reserve, which is where I'm at right now. I grew up here, and I'm with my mother. And so, coming from a place where there isn't that much tech or people in certain areas of, like the Silicon Valley is booming, or, there's areas of intensity for tech or arts or culture. And sometimes coming from an area that's isolated and, far to get to these cities or destinations or locations, it's harder to become and elevate in industries, whether it be art or music. And, we have come a long way now with the internet. The internet has allowed a lot of us to be able to get a better footing out here in the industry and to be able to share our voices and to be able to share our art and culture and all of that. But it wasn't always that easy. And so, for me personally, I've been doing music for over 15 years and, 10 years professionally. And so for the first 5 years, it was a lot of learning, being here on the reserve, doing local shows, events, open mics, and there wasn't many. And so then it led to me hosting my own and starting to throw my own to try to be able to stay active and be able to learn more in the industry without, just letting it go. So that led to me doing a lot of shows in my community. And it led to one of the first shows that I've ever done in my whole career was actually at the school that I attended here on my reserve. And so when I had went and pitched it to them, it started, I was going around to like Boys and Girls Club and to community centers. And, I was trying to find a way to get my voice out there as well as the local radio stations. And a lot of them, they didn't know me or understand, or, the hip hop wasn't a thing around here. So they were like, a lot of them weren't interested. And I got lucky to run into one of the principals that went to the school that I went to. And she had seen some of my music, and, she heard it on the radio, and she loved the fact that I had come from this reserve, and I have those passions and goals. And she wanted me to like be able to speak to the kids about that. And she had went back and talked to the other schools and to all of the schools in the district and let them know that she was going to throw an event. And they all, the same ones that I went to and asked, and they didn't understand at the time, they were more than happy after the other principal had told them. And so it led to all of the youth from pre-K all the way up until junior high had been there to experience my first show that I'd ever done. And now that's
Wow.
one way to break the ice as well, because I was super nervous. I
Right.
did semi practicing of what you could do at not knowing. And
Right.
it was the best way to break in though, because, I was able to speak to all of the youth from my reserve. It built something in me. The press had showed up, APTN, which is a
Nice.
Native American news station. And it's like the main station that we have all throughout the nation. And so it was that moment that I realized the significance and the power of what I had and what I could do with not only just my music, my voice, and my journey, but
Right.
also now these youth. And so I look back on that moment. And so the last few years, I've seen the opportunities within NFTs and the market, and, these conferences. Now it gives us a different opportunity of not only networking, building music, but now I see that we can change a whole future for culture, identity,
Right.
placements, and these kids that are in areas where there isn't really nothing. Now we can give them, more hope and more voice, other than just hoping to, get on a movie or write a hit song. Now any song can be a hit, and, now you can make your
Right.
own movies. And so those are what I've been doing the last few years. And that all led me to, getting into NFTs a few years ago. And it was 2018 that I had learned about crypto, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't believe it. And I wish I would have, because I remember one of the guys telling me to get a Bitcoin wallet back when it was like $30. And the story, we all have those stories, the crypto hate.
Right.
And so then it led years later of just being in Clubhouse. I was on Clubhouse. That was when it first came out. And that was the transition of Web3 and all this new creative minds coming together through the internet. And an average person is sitting next to a famous person. And I felt like that was the first time in all of culture and civilization and all the history that those barriers of whether you're famous or not, or whether you have money or not, for the first time in all of history, it didn't matter. Everybody was there for what was happening. And it was the tech, it was the communication, it was the burst of art. And then, we felt that the second wave of the main general people coming in, and, that's where the scams and the crypto, and, we went through these waves. But the beautiful thing is people like myself and Ritzy, and, now you guys with Butterscotch, we're here to ride through those waves with them. But it's for a bigger cause and for the longevity of everything, not just ourselves, but culture and, history
Right.
in general. Like now we can put our own words into there, and it's her story and his story together, and not just, one path or one dimension. And so now these opportunities with blockchain get me super excited. And I don't know if I went left with the first questions, but that's what, yeah,
No.
I think that's okay.
No, it's great. Perfect. That's what we wanted to hear, your full story and how important representation is, and the lack of access and resources that you had even after 15 years, but that you made a conscious choice to go back with what you've learned and the art of hip hop. Because, if you know the history of hip hop, it's about telling people what's happening in communities, what's happening in the world, the kind of like news reporting, right? And you're doing that, and you've inspired probably so many that you probably don't even know about, and you keep continuing to go back. And I'm sure that you've entered the Web3 space, and that you continue that tradition of going back and sharing resources and information. So why don't you share with us what specifically you are building and have built utilizing blockchain?
Yeah, and in the beginning, it was just being a part of something that was exciting and trying to find something new for music and find a new platform or direction, considering, the way Spotify and Apple and the industry was going. And also the fact of real lyrics and, stuff from the heart and emotion and soul is diluted and often watered out. And, the artists are purposely overlooked and, put to the side or even blackballed when it comes to, giving knowledge and information. And so the industry has been, one-sided in a direction that we all know to make money and push the machine further. And so that's created a lot harder steps and burdens for artists like myself that just want to tell stories, want to provide art and live and succeed through these means and not have to worry about, those barriers. And so that led me into always trying to find new spaces, going to different cities and trying to see which conferences or events. And it was just always trying to find something new. And then once Clubhouse had come in and I got a wave of it, I was in the first few rooms, I was just freestyling and I was pitching the music because that was my thing. That was my profession. And being in these rooms at the time, there was no music platforms. There was no Web3 music spaces. There was no Sound XYZ or Audius. And, what's funny is Audius had come out right around that time. And so people don't know that Audius is a UK platform. And so I had my music on there back in, I don't even remember, like 13, 14, that they were already talking about utilizing blockchain and all of that. And I just didn't understand what I was on yet. I just knew it was something new. And so it was like those little things of just saying, let me try and put it on there because it might be something, led me to, being in these Clubhouse spaces for hours and days and weeks and months. And in the beginning, it was like an addiction, not sleeping. So it was so bad, whoever was on Clubhouse knows, getting in showers, jumping in vehicles, eating your food. And it was right there. I broke my phone twice being on Clubhouse because, just trying to, drive and set it down. And it's just that excitement that as an artist and community that I was looking for a long time, I had found it. And without the music platforms, nobody was really listening to musicians. And so we'd freestyle, and I ended up freestyling with like MC Hammer and Mike Jones. And so there was celebrities in there, and we're like around. And this is, I remember when, artists like Cristiano and Violetta and Sammy, like they were just popping in too and learning what it was. And at a time, I remember freestyling with like Cristiano, and we were like out rapping MC Hammer in a freestyle. That was the day I was like, all right, now we have community. Now we have the space to provide. And I started trying to figure out how or what to move in there. And at the time, also, there wasn't indigenous sections, indigenous platforms. And you know what I mean? There wasn't even, an outlet for us. And so I was trying to, find those places that even knew. And, I was pitching, let's do an indigenous section and let's do these things. And back then it was falling on deaf ears. And so it led to a few of us hosting an indigenous space, and shout out to NFTP. And, she's like a major inspiration as well, because, she's been going since I've been going since Clubhouse days, and she's still active. She's on all chains, and she was one of the few people that was there in the Clubhouse days too. And so at a direction when I was like, all right, what do I do? Music, art, what? She was putting out art pieces, and I'm like, I've drawn all my life. I've did painting, and, so all my album covers and all my tattoos, I drew them myself. And so it was just like already naturally, I was already doing these, combinations of art with the music and all of that. And so I said, you know what? This is fun. And at the time, like Mooncats were big, and like, CryptoPunks were blowing up, and these big NFT projects were just being created. And, at the time they'd blow up, and I didn't have funds or currency to be able to, play these games that everybody was playing. And so back then in 2020 and 2021, I was indigenizing like certain characters. So I did indigenize Mooncats, and, I couldn't afford one. So I took one of the cats that I liked and I put a mohawk on him, and I like, you know what I mean? And so I did that with a couple different things. And then I was like, all right, no natives, not even my own ones that I was talking to bought it, and nobody was really interested. And so that sat there for like a couple weeks. And so I was like, all right, let me try something else. And at the time, Beeple did his big project. And so I was like, all right, this guy just did something that I want all of us to be able to do. You know what I mean? Like with our art. And so I did like a homage to him. I did like a Beeple head, and I wanted to see if that would work. And so I went from my genesis of me holding a coin saying ETH and Bitcoin, and I put my music behind it. We'll talk about that in a second. And then it led to the Crypto Kitty. And then it led to Beeple. And then as soon as I put Beeple up there, it sold. So Beeple sold for like 20 something bucks. Another person seen that sale, went back, and a native dude seen it and went and bought the Crypto Kitty. And so I was like, all right, they didn't buy my song one. They're not listening to my music. So they're liking these weird art projects. And so from that point on, you'll see my first year or two in crypto and NFTs was just random art pieces, whatever came to my heart and mind. And I got a surprise indigenous led. It started with me doing the pieces. And then once AI came out, I had did like a whole thing. And so that's on there on the internet. And this is something that we'll bring to the light down the road. And I just wanted it to be there as, placeholder for all of us to go back and say, look at this is what's done and what we can do. And so I just been using those little steps to try to figure out what the next thing I could do would be. And it led to now I got I think I got like 40 or 50 pieces through OpenSea, then on Foundation. I put a Beeple head on Foundation a couple years ago. And those were all just like trying to find out what was next and be a part of the crowd while in the background figuring out what I was going to do. What nobody really notices or realized, I was talking to Crypto Novo and I was at Beeple's event literally just this past couple months ago. And so I had my art picked for Beeple's big celebration he had last year. And so I flew down there and I got to meet a lot of the people that were in this industry for years, as well as a lot of people that were coming up, blowing up. And so it just made me realize, and he's like, yo, I was looking at your one NFT. He's like, I think you put out one of the first music NFTs. And I was like, I didn't even think about it. But that first one I did, I attached my music to it. And if you go to every single NFT I've ever put out, if you buy it, the utility says, message me and you'll get a special surprise. And once it opens up, it says you received my album and a couple other things in there. So I was already doing that like in 2020 and 2021 without realizing it, because I was just trying to attach myself and what I was good at to whatever was happening at the time. And so that all led to, we fast forward all these years later, a lot of those projects I didn't think would go anywhere. And those are the projects that got me invited to Beeple's. Those are the projects that are getting shown in spaces. I also did in 2022, there was a art festival in one of these local towns here. And so I had signed up and I had my mom painting pictures. Well, I sat there with all these digital pieces in 2021 and I had physically drawn a piece of the street and people were going by seeing the drawing. And then I stopped it halfway and I set it up and I left it there and they kept going by and they're like, you're not going to finish it? And I'm like, I am over here. Come look. And they would come around and they would see me finishing it digitally. And then at the end of the show, I minted it and it's minted on chain right now. But back then people didn't know what I was doing. Those people throwing that event will probably look back in a couple years and that'll be like a historical piece for them, and myself. Cause I actually put the date, the time and titles and it's on chain right now on OpenSea. And so like, I don't care about whether it sells or not now because I understand the significance of what we're doing. And, for me, these are more of, like I said, placeholders, bookmarks. And, especially once this last year came and I started like getting achievements and getting invited places because of the old work, it just nailed that home even more to like now when I think of something or we want to create, I say, create it, throw it on chain. Let's get it out there. So that way, we can look back at it instead of, talking about it in a few years. And so that all led to me putting out random arts and being a music guy. But I just dropped my first music official NFT just a few weeks ago. And so I dropped it. Man. Yeah, thank you. I dropped it a week before NFT NYC. So that way, when I got to the conference that I had something new on chain. And it like went full circle for everything I've ever done from the art and all of that. And then I dropped my first song on chain officially, even though my music's been there the whole time.
Right. Wow. Congrats.
Thank you.
Talking about what you've been doing, just like these bookmarks, you're kind of archiving, right? And these moments in time and how important it is, especially because you're an indigenous artist. And your panel was in 2023, the All Indigenous panel at NFT NYC was the day or a couple of days before I did my presentation on how above and beyond art, NFTs can empower marginalized communities. And so what I learned was very important from your guys' panel is all the different ways that blockchain could be used, especially for global indigenous communities. And I think you touched upon it is archiving, right? Is like the music, land rights, and all these different things. So indigenous communities are leveraging blockchain and cryptocurrency. What are some other use cases that you've done or that you've seen other indigenous communities use blockchain?
There's been, in the last few years, I've seen, pretty much most of the directions trying to be approached, whether it be your art and the music to, I've seen, full organizations that went and created complete organizations under the umbrella of Web3 by the old traditional, but then using the government standards to be able to apply and get their land back or claim minerals. And so these people have been in the process of that since the last NFT NYC. And me and them know that that's a hurdle, that you're playing a long game. And so just the fact that they have started that and they're still pushing it, and at the end we can get the details on their names and all of that because it's a longer one too. And it's just, they're in positions to be able to now not only, yes, when the document or a treaty or anything is created and it's public knowledge, now we can make these things public.
Yes.
And then put them on the blockchain through that. And as long as the blockchain and the internet is up, these things survive and exist, which never in history has that been possible. Usually it's one document that's duplicated, and within that duplication process traveled to many places, hands. And we know that things have been changed, manipulated, and all that all throughout history. And so now we're in a position to where we can actually change that or be in a benefit of our own historical future. And, that even stretches beyond the fact of now, you're talking about treaties or the significance of culture, but even for the individual, the artists that are out there just creating the rattles, the drums, painting. And even like, you go back to the pictures and the pictographs and the oldest pictures that you have from any of us and all of these things, they're historical documents now. And there's nothing stopping that from today too, because, there is, the funny meme art like we have, but there's also artists out here that have reestablished themselves through their art and, bringing their culture and that identity into it, whether it be painting on hide. And, another artist I've seen, making amazing paintings on newspapers and using those and then creating like just the craziest historical figures on it. And so now these things can be taken a picture of or scanned and placed on the chain. And now another thing I was thinking in the future is the option. Right now you got to put the option inside of like, when you buy, or I was picturing in the future a click down menu whether you want the physical or not. So right now, if I just want to support you, I would buy that drum and just click on it, and I got the PFP in there. But there's an option if I click the button and that person just made, 5 drums, that you can purchase one of those drums and then that person will ship it to you. And then now you got a digital receipt. And, now not only are you getting an official, authentic, handmade drum from, that artisan, but you're also supplying a revenue for that artist that, now they can do that with their phone. And it's like, it's taking eBay, Amazon, and, all of these social money sites and, just amplifying it by 100 more for the gain of human and indigenous and your heart and soul more than the monetary purpose.
Right. No, it's legacy, right? We're just talking about legacy and having different tools to take back certain things and ownership. And, some of the amazing folks that were on that panel, we have discussions where there's a wave with some indigenous communities of taking and learning the language because it was taken away. And so putting that on the blockchain, I think is very exciting as well. Like all of that legacy work, right? It's not for necessarily financial gain. It's for the culture and legacy of all these indigenous cultures and communities, which is fantastic. Before we leave, what is the best way for people to follow you and hear your music and all that good stuff?
Yeah, all social media platforms. And the biggest thing too is, I wanted to, put home is never giving up, mainly because of, every time I'm wondering or second guessing something, like even, a couple days ago about the music and the art, there's always a signs and momentum to keep you going. So, if you want to know what I've really been going through the last few years, go check out Jayohcee.com, JAYOHCEE.com, and you can learn about my music, my journey, and Yinta Films, YINTAH Films. And even better, if you go pick up one of my NFTs, you'll get the utility of, getting lyric sheets and, albums and personal things from myself. And so these are the things that I'm doing to, not only help myself, but all artists and indigenous creators moving forward. And you can find me on all social media at I am Jayohcee. And I want to thank you, Cleve, Ritzy, and Butterscotch Media, because this is what it's about right here. You made my year, and it's going to be, monumental. So I appreciate you so much. Nyawa in my language is thank you. So Nyawa Goa, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Jayohcee, for joining us, for sharing your story, and providing so much visibility. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Go get dreams out now, everywheres.
And thank you to our Butterscotch queens and kings for joining us today. Make sure to join us next time. We will most definitely bring you another amazing guest. Until next time, gracias.